at the State Department. Don't hold it against me. Um, I'm Director of Advanced Placement, Gifted Education, and Arts in Education. And just like some of you, possibly with the budget cuts, I've gotten some extra hats, and I love them. Sometimes it's hard to figure out which one I'm wearing, though. So you are here to talk about classroom management. We're going to talk about things that we do in the classroom, things that might be helpful to you. It's not all going to be about discipline, but it will be about things that we know work in organizing your classroom and managing not only your class, but the helping with the school as a whole. So your first assignment was bell work. This is something that I have always done. Have something available for kids to do when they come into the classroom. And we've had someone already share that with us back here. Let students know what they are expected to do as soon as they come into your room. So that can be, you know, bell work, you don't have to call it that, but have it available for them to do. It can be a short assignment, it can be a couple of math problems, could be, if you're in an art class, it could be, you know, start collecting your materials for the day and you'll need this, this, and this. But that procedure starts as soon as your kids enter the classroom. So when you're setting up your classroom for next year, start thinking about that. What am I going to have them do every year or every day when they come into the classroom so they'll know what to do? If students know what to do, then they're less likely to make up their own agenda for that time. So let's, I was going to go around because I thought there'd be like 10 people with the ESSA session going on. But let's choose a few of you who would like to share what they wrote. And the reason I had you put your name on a card, and you may not like this method at all, but is in order to call on different people so that everybody has a chance to be part of this. If you don't want to answer when I call your name, that just pass, you don't have to answer. But I would like to hear some of the things that you do in your classroom currently that helps your students stay on task and helps them focus and helps things be organized. So how about we start with Chris Fulton. Where's Chris? Hey Chris, would you like to share?
When they first come in, I learn the kids' names right away. I address them by name every day. I try to talk to them every single day. It's not always easy because you don't have John.
Yeah, right.
I try to get every student, even the quiet ones, personal.
Yes, yes. And what level do you teach? You teach high school, what? Spanish, yeah. Oh, that's great. That's another reinforcement of verbal. I know some teachers will ask a question every morning who teach Spanish or other languages, something that they will remember, you know, ¿Cómo está? I don't know. But an easy question to start with so that they're used to verbalizing. I love that. Anybody else? Okay, let's ask Bruce. Hey.
I teach elementary, middle school, special education kids, so they know the expectations as they come in. And you go over it and over it.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And what level? High school? Oh, you said middle school and high school?
Elementary, middle school.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wow. Wow. Okay. And that's a really good thing, so they know what to expect. How about Gabe LaBounty?
So I actually am just starting to teach this fall, but I'm going to be teaching middle school music, and in choir especially, having them come in and engage in warm-ups that are not exactly the same as they've done the day before, but similar,
Mm-hmm.
so that so that we can use scaffolding and build off of old stuff that we've used, and
Mm-hmm.
then that also helps them focus in on the task at hand, especially coming from a math classroom, a history classroom, anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It gets them really focused on the task at hand, which is music.
Yes, very true. And as he mentioned, you know, you can build on the lesson the day before. You can ask a question or assign a task that kind of reviews that and then builds to the warm-up for that day. Can we ask one more? Terry. Doesn't have a last name. Oh.
Just reading each one at the door. I mean, as I'm training, I get a feel of
Yeah, their mood, and if something's happened, or yeah, that's great. Greet them at the door. Well, this method, you know, you may or may not like and choose to use, but for some things, it's really good. And the students that are already called, you can put a blank card, and the ones that are already called, you put at the back. So it kind of keeps kids engaged a little bit because they know, you know, that their name's in there and they may be called upon. But as you know, never embarrass a student. If they don't want to answer, then you can either have someone help them with an answer or you can let them pass. Keep your sticky notes, by the way, because when you leave, I sure would like to have those to do a collection of things that work in classrooms. We're talking and we're teaching 21st century students. I remember us saying, we've got to get kids ready for the 21st century. Well, we're in it deep. And we have kids who were born in the 21st century in our classes. So they are different than the students that we have taught before, unless you're a brand new teacher. And then you may have the advantage, actually. But you'll hear things, and you've probably heard things in the teacher's lounge. Kids are not like they used to be. Kids, you know, they do not listen, they do not, you know, and they aren't, because society is not like it used to be either. So we need to look at what the characteristics are of the kids we teach first. And Randy Strick, I don't know if you are familiar with him. He's an educator and a consultant out of Oregon, but he has called this Generation M. And Generation M stands for Media Multitasker. And that puts it all together, doesn't it? Our students are adept at dealing with multiple stimuli, especially when it comes to electronics. They were born with that technology. This group of kids tends to shut down a teacher who, in a situation where you would lecture for the whole class period. They need to be involved with each other. They need to learn from each other. You need to have some things to break up the class, because otherwise they're going to zone out. One thing that I know concerns us across the nation, but here in Oklahoma too, is the level of family income does affect some things that we deal with at school. I pulled this, and it is 2013 from citydata.com, but it shows that the highest percentage of families in Oklahoma with school-age children have a household income between $20,000 and $25,000, and that's the highest graph there. And you can see some are below and some are close, a little bit below. Higher income, you can see over here to the right, are not as many. So that's something we do have to think about. The students who are coming to our classroom with maybe not the advantages of kids that we've seen in the past. Poverty, and that's what we're looking at. Students who, you know, may not have a healthy diet, may not have the income for books that we want them to read. These are characteristics that we see in them. Chronic and acute stress. And as you said, if you greet the students in the morning, you see that there's a stressor somewhere. It could be just from dealing with their situation at home. Cognitive gaps or delays are oftentimes seen in these students. Emotional and social challenges, and health and safety issues. So what does that look like in your classroom? If you have students who come in that you know maybe have some unstable things going on, or you know, not enough to eat, what does that look like? Like all of them? Sometimes we think of, when we're dealing with behavior, it's the top picture, you know, the actively acting out. But it's also things like sleeping. They didn't get enough sleep, or frustration, or disconnecting from the classroom. So those are things we have to plan for when we're talking about classroom management. We have all kinds of students in our classroom, and the stakes are very high. Dropouts are 3 times more likely to be unemployed, 63 times more likely to be incarcerated. I just couldn't believe that. More likely to live in poverty and more prone to ill health. Why would they be prone to ill health? medical care if you don't have, you know, if you can't afford adequate insurance, right. And those are all things that, that influence their behavior at school. So, what's more powerful than that? Probably not hoping for, hoping for better kids, waiting for the nation to end poverty. These are things that we're dealing with. Education has proven to be, and multiple researchers have shown that education is the most powerful tool for students in helping them rise from poverty and learn. Education. And you, as the classroom teacher, are the most significant influence on your students. Teachers are more important, especially if students do not have that situation at home, that loving situation. And this is really important to know, how important you are. You can completely erase the academic effects of poverty within 5 years. That means if a student has, for 5 consecutive years, good teachers who can manage the class and who know what they're teaching, that gap can be erased. And that's pretty powerful. Take a minute to talk to somebody next to you. Do you think a good teacher is just born? You know, you've heard people say, yeah, they're natural. Do you think they're made? Take about 1 minute each to talk about that with someone next to you.
Hi, I'm Cliff. What are your thoughts?
Nobody's next to you. What do you think?
Okay, I just moved over here.
Oh.
I think that you can make a good teacher. I think that there's so many resources and so many tools, so many people willing to help each other that I think you can make a good teacher.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you. All right. How many of you thought it was definitely you're born to be a teacher? Zero. How many? One. One. A half of one. How many think a good teacher is made? How many think it's both? Oh, okay. All right. There, as we were talking, there are lots of resources in teacher education and outside of that that can really help make a good teacher. And I'll confess to you, my first year of teaching, I could not wait for Christmas break because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I had some encouragement and kept on. The next year got better, and the next year got better, and then I felt really good. So, you know, I think it is a little bit of both. But we can't leave all of it to chance. I mean, a well-managed classroom just doesn't appear out of nowhere. You have to either have the intuition for it or learn how to set that up. It takes a good deal of effort, and it's up to you to do that. So it's a great responsibility. Let's look realistically at this list. There are lots of things we can't control, and let's just look at it. Let's have a pity party for about 1 minute, and then we'll go on. But we really, I mean, we can't control any of these things. We may have a slight influence on some of them, but, you know, even down to the weather, and I added that kind of as a joke, but you know when a storm's coming in, and you know the day before a holiday what kids are like. You know, we can't change school funding. We can, you know, campaign for those kind of things, but really there's a lot there. Now, yes.
Don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
will this be available somewhere?
Yes, yes, and let me stop here and tell you, we didn't do handouts. We have, and you'll notice in the other session they're kind of slight because we're, you know, not using paper a lot. All the handouts that I have will be available to you through my email, and the PowerPoint will be posted on the State Department website after the conference. So we have 2 weeks of conference, and after that they'll all be posted on our website. So you can download, you can show them to people, or whatever you want to do. Thanks for asking that. But we do get kind of bogged down sometimes with what we can't control. But there are things that we can control, and that's what we need to focus on. We can control the school environment with our peers. We can control the expectations in our class for our students. We can control our attitude towards students. And that's something that students pick up on pretty easily, don't they? Whether you like them, you can't not like a kid. You can't dislike a kid during school. I mean, you just can't. And because that's their haven sometimes. Communication with parents, we can control. We can do newsletters, we can do emails, we can do remindme.com, all kinds of things. Course offerings, that's something that we can talk with our administrators about, but we can have an influence on that. The quality of instruction, obviously, and how we deliver the lessons. Assessments, in other words, gauging how our students are doing. It doesn't have to be the end of the semester test, but those things are things that we can control so we can keep our teaching on track to where students are. Praise and recognition is really important, even if you're, from kindergarten to seniors. I wouldn't do stickers with seniors, but maybe. But just recognition of their efforts. Safety, extracurricular activities. That's a lot that we can do to help kids in our classrooms. It's all about student learning. That's why we're here. So how do you know if kids are learning in your classroom? They're going to ask good questions. They're going to explain when you ask them something. They're going to explain it so that you understand it. They're able to tutor their peers. And I would caution you, if that is something you do in your classroom, don't over-rely on that. Because remember, I also have the gifted hat, and sometimes those students are put upon to help a little bit too much. But, they complete their work. If a student is not learning and you ask them a question, what are they going to do? They focus on procedure rather than understanding a concept. They're not there yet. They may not turn their work in, or it's not accurate, or it's not complete, and those kind of things. We need to be watching for this all the time, whether kids are learning or not learning. That's what I meant by kind of a quick assessment rather than just a test all the time. The quote at the bottom, you may not be able to see it back there, but I wanted to read it first. Many instructional arrangements seem contrived, but there is nothing wrong with that. It is the teacher's function to contrive conditions under which students learn. I thought that was that's Harry Wong, by the way. First of all, we want to make sure we're teaching great material. We know the curriculum. That will lead to student learning. We need to do activities at different levels. Can you all hear me? Okay. Get your old Bloom's, pyramid out, or your depth of knowledge, and make sure you're doing tasks at different levels, not just knowledge comprehension. We want to go to synthesis and evaluation, and then provide a variety of instructional strategies. This will really help your discipline as well if you do different things. Not every day, okay, I'm going to lecture, then you work with a partner, lecture, work with a partner, so kind of mix it up. Engage students in learner-centered activities. One thing I've done, and you might do something similar, I have the kids fill out an index card with their name on the front at the beginning of the year, and on the back, I ask them to write 3 things they want to learn this year. And they may come into the classroom with no idea what geometry even is, but 3 things that they would like to learn for the year, and I make an effort to teach those, or at least address those, or find them somebody who knows about that, so that they feel like they're valued. What I want to learn, she paid attention to me. And of course, establish routines of self-reflection. Students need to kind of think about how they learn, what they're learning, what they're not learning, and why. And so we're going to spend the rest of our time with this kind of model. This is Randy Strick, Dr. Strick. The 5 things we need to do in our classroom for classroom management are structure and organization, teach how to observe those rules and procedures, observe students, interact with students, and correct calmly. And sometimes that's a challenge when a student gets under your skin. First of all, excuse me, structure and organization. Is there a difference to you between orderly and well-managed? Or is it kind of the same thing? me see if our link will work here. Let's see. And we'll see. Nope, it will not. Thank you very much. All right, if you've ever, I'll just describe it to you. I'll act it out. If you've ever seen the movie Teachers, it's old, Nick Nolte. There's a teacher who has won the Best Classroom Discipline Award 3 years in a row. My students are disciplined. And then when you see the classroom, it looks like this. He sits at the front and reads his paper. The kids know what to do. They come in, they grab the assignment, they go to their seat, they work for 45 minutes, the bell rings, they put it back in the tray, and they leave. And he's still there sleeping behind his newspaper. So that's what I mean by you can have orderly, you can have kids be absolutely quiet, but are you managing their learning? And so that's a different paradigm, I think. Nope, I clicked the wrong place again. Sorry, people. All right, let's get off that. All right, the first thing to think about is your classroom. And I know that may sound simple, but think about what your classroom looks like or is going to look like this year. And think about what you have in there that you have to have, what you can get rid of, and what you need. Because the way you set up your classroom often influences how well things go during the day. So think about, do you need shelves? Ask. You know, maybe somebody has some that they're getting rid of. And if you have stuff that you haven't used, weed it out. Think about how you're going to arrange everything this year. Draw it out on a piece of paper or go to your classroom early, because believe me, that physical structure influences how your class is going to learn. Can everybody in the classroom get to where they need to get quickly? For instance, if I'm going to do a group back here, a group activity, and you all are seated this way, can everybody get over there without slapping somebody or, you know, talking? Maybe not. Maybe I need to have an aisle here. So you really do need to think about where students are going to go in the classroom and how they're going to get there. Is the classroom scheduled to include consistency and opportunity for movement? We can't control the length of time in our classrooms, but the activities we can. Have clear expectations for transitions between activities been defined. When a student switches from one activity or one group to another, right, that's an opportunity for things to happen. And so we need to think about teaching students a procedure for when you go to that table, when you go to the library, when you come into class. They need to know ahead of time. As you can see, I thought I was going to have a handout, but we kind of nixed those. But doesn't that happen sometimes? Like, what did you say? So let's see if this is an example of what one high school student teacher does in his classroom.
I find that anytime anybody talks about burnout, the most people say that's not the students. Sometimes it is classroom management, like they're not properly trained or they're not properly supported with the classroom discipline issue. I have a different perspective on classroom management. It's when you walk into my classroom, it's my classroom. My name is on the door. My name is on the schedule. My name is on the nameplate on my desk. And so you kind of have this attitude that this is my classroom, and it's my responsibility to provide a safe and a productive environment for students. And I work very hard on that. That classroom management piece, and I think is so very, very, very important, and you cannot expect other people to develop your classroom management for you. And you definitely can't expect your administration, you can't expect other people or other teachers to build that positive climate. So what is one thing that a teacher could do that would help their classroom management? And so I played a lot with my desks to where that I could always be no more than 2.5 steps away from touching their desk, no matter where I was in the room.
And so I spent a lot of time making sure that my classroom was set up to where it was a safe environment, to where I could teach from anywhere in the room. I could teach from my desk. I could teach from either chalkboard, any chalkboard. If I was lecturing down the middle, I was always 1 to 2 to 2.5 steps away from touching a student's desk. Just setting up an environment to where you are anticipating discipline issues before they begin. One other thing I've done before is put mirrors in my classroom, which seems so bizarre, but especially for middle school students, they love to see themselves. And when I put mirrors in my classroom, my discipline problems went way down because students could see themselves acting up. They could see themselves if they are misbehaving.
I thought that was interesting. But the proximity thing I think is really important too. When students are working, just to walk around and they feel that presence. There's a lot you can do without saying a word, but just kind of make every student aware that you're pretty close to them. And then teach students the behaviors you want. Don't assume that they know how to study, that they know how to address adults properly. Don't assume it. We have to teach it. A lot of kids do know that coming in, but teach it for your class. As the podcast just said, it's your classroom. You may have school rules, but you have procedures in your class, and so you need to teach them what to expect and what you want from them. So think about it, rather than just saying first or second day of school, like, okay, you're always going to turn your papers over there, and then you're going to come in and be quiet. Okay, you need to be very specific, right? With 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 10-year-olds. What does that mean? So act it out for them. Show them, this is where I want you to put your papers. I want you to put it in the tray. Don't throw it down, but put it in the tray, and then go directly to your seat, the most direct route to your seat, and I'll have Belle work on the board. Explain in detail what you want, and don't expect them to remember for a couple of times. They'll get it, but they may not remember the first few times. Review it, as the year goes on, or the semester. Teach expectations and provide teaching and reteaching as you need to. If you have class rules, you may not call them rules, you may call them protocols, but think now, before the school year starts, what those rules are going to be. Make it a short list, 5 rules maybe. A short list, easy to read, easy to understand, simple, and plan the consequences. If you're going to have a rule, what happens if they break the rule, or when they do, because somebody will. Think about it carefully. If you say no phones in the classroom, then are there special circumstances where they could have a phone? Are there special needs students or someone who has asthma or diabetes? Are they allowed to have their phone? And so think about the consequences and the whole picture. And again, they have to be taught and have to be visible, so put them up in your room somewhere. Be consistent, and that means, if Cindy doesn't turn in her work, then I have a consequence for her. But if Christy doesn't, well, I know, I like her a lot because she's really turns in her work all the rest of the time, so we'll just let it pass. Be consistent. You know that your students notice everything. And then review periodically. Procedures and routines are different than rules. You have a few rules, but you have a lot of procedures. So in the rules, explain them, rehearse them, reinforce them, and they'll start doing automatically. The bottom square just says, these are things to think about. What are your procedures for starting class? What are your procedures for bathrooms? Tardies. What do you do for tardies, by the way? What do most of you do?
Supposed to send them to the office, but then it just eats up class time. And they're disruption, they come back in, and so I'm not really great about doing that. I just write them at the merit, and then I'll turn it in.
Yeah.
And I have a chance to get the
Oh, okay.
Or
Yeah.
I change it like in our online system, Mark and Target.
Yeah.
The merit is supposed to be turned in so the parents get notified.
I think that's a good point. I mean, sometimes if you rely on sending them to the office, they're going to miss way more class time than they need to. They lollygag. That's right. Yeah. And so, we need to rely on our administrators, but really we in the classroom need to try to take care of most things. So what about keeping a student after class? They'll gripe, won't they? And they'll be late for the next class. It could work.
I've done that before with, I had some sophomores, and I just kind of, because they had athletics the next hour, so I kind of held them into that 3 minutes to 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and then they
Yeah.
had consequences in the classroom.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Those are things to think through, you know, if that's going to work for you, or if you want to see them after school, what if they ride a bus? And so, you know, there are different ways to manage that, and you need to think about what works for you in your classroom.
I found asking students to see you after school, well, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta do that.
Right.
Can't make it.
Yeah, yeah. And so that might be a situation where you do want to keep them after class, even if it's just for like 30 seconds. You know, you need to sit there and think about, and the other kids will, I mean, that kind of does set the precedent for the rest of the class.
One time when I had trouble with the 8th grade class, and I finally just said, guys, don't you know that if you took care of this problem, I wouldn't have to? Because peer pressure, believe it or not, you're gonna get fed up and you're gonna take care of this. And so sometimes that works. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
take care of this problem. Don't laugh at them.
Right,
You
right.
know, don't keep this activity going.
Yeah, and that's where if you are clear on what you expect, that really helps. Changing classes, do you have a procedure for that? Like, bell rang, I'm up, boom. Think about what you want that transition to look like, turning in work and so forth, all of those things that you do in your classroom. These are two strategies that I like. One is bell work, or whatever you want to call it. This is an assignment actually for an art class on the left. It's their warm-up or their bell work. When they come into the class, they know what to do. The other one is exit slips. Exit cards, you can use index cards or sticky notes, but it's a question or a math problem, something at the end of the day that the students put their name on, they fill it out, and they leave it either, you know, in a basket or they hand it to you. And I like this, and of course it's from Pinterest, but I really like it because the teacher has grouped them by the responses. They've got it. Okay, these kids did the problem correctly, I'm gonna stick them there. I need to clarify for them, they're really not getting it. Or small group instruction, they're lost. And so it's another way you can evaluate if you want to. You don't have to grade those, you can once in a while. But I really like that because kids know that they need to be engaged, they need to pay attention, because you're gonna ask them. And then another one is, you know, the social emotional that we don't have time to do during class. One teacher did something every day of the week. One was Motivational Monday. And they grabbed a sticky note and they wrote something nice about somebody else on Monday. Mondays are tough, and so they wrote something else and put it up there, something about someone else and put it up there. Those are two quick, easy strategies. And then teach expectations by first describing, provide an example, practice, let them do it as practice, routine, or reinforce positively, and keep reviewing. And then the consequences that we talked about, you can use rewards. You can, in catching cheaters and misbehavior, I really don't have a lot to say about that, because you kind of know. If a student, you know, keeps looking down at their lap, they're probably looking at their phone. Or, you know, if you see their jaw moving, they're chewing gum. I mean, if they're wearing a hoodie, maybe, during test time with earphones. So those are things, you know, we just want to help them out so they don't get in trouble for that. Never engaged in an argument with a student, and this is hard sometimes. Do not yell at students. Don't yell something across the room, because it does send a signal that they've gotten to me, my emotions are, because if you already set out the procedures and the rules and you just say, oh, well, you know, you're not doing so-and-so, or thank you for doing that. But don't argue with a student. It is what it is. Your rules are your rules. And then, as I said before, even if a student is driving you nuts, you still want the best for them, and you owe it to them. Don't forget to use humor. I think this works great with junior high and high school kids, but you know, in your rules, just you can print off some posters or have this up on the board. What I look like if you're talking while I'm talking. Oh, you're late? Well, you can come in if you dance. If you have a question, raise your hand. And then, this is an old movie too. If you could just go ahead and start that bell work, that'd be great. So I think, what's it called? The Office? No, not Office Space, yeah. So, but humor does work very well with kids. This is something that I just wanted to share that I love, and if I were teaching right now, I'd probably use Walmart has these desk towers. Now you don't have to arrange them around like this. You can use them in other ways, but if you have a group of kids together, drawer one could be for cell phones, and they put them in there unless it's a day that you use cell phones, maybe for homework or something, or for research. But phones go in there, and they're right by them. Nobody's going to take their phone. Two is dry erase boards. If you use those for, they can hold them up and show you the answer. And those are a little bit messy. You have to have Kleenex to wipe them off, but it's also an alternative. Drawer three is supplies like markers, pens, scissors, that kind of thing. Kleenex. You're going to always need Kleenex. And then folders, individual student folders. And that's one idea also that I'd like to show you. To have a folder for each student. And now this is from elementary, but I think it works pretty well secondary. A do and a done. I got to do this work. I'm done. Put it over here. Easy to check, easy for them to see what they still have to do. And another thing you can use the folder for is a student data notebook. I'm not going to go into that a lot, but look up solution trees, stuff that you can download. This is called Student Data Notebooks, and it's from Solution Tree, and it's all free download. But you tab it and have students mark their attendance or how they're proceeding in math. They can graph, their progress on tests and that kind of thing. And you can use them for tests to put up like this. So everybody has their folders there. So I really like that. I got carried away, I will admit it, with colored coding everything, which is great if it works for you. But if it's just something that, the kids aren't paying attention to, then, don't worry about it. And if there are things you haven't used in 10 years, scan them, and keep them if you want to, or just get rid of them. And then teach social behaviors. Teach students how to interact with their peers appropriately and appropriate language. Sometimes you have to be very specific about, we don't say that word. Respect, what does that look like? That kind of thing. I'm going to go through the last few quickly. Observe, supervise, but also that proximity to keep kids on task. And also to let them know that you're there for them. You can pat them on the shoulder, and nobody's going to get weirded out, because hardly anybody sees you do that. But, that's very helpful to let them know you're there and you care. And then interact positively with your students. And correct calmly. Count to 3 if you need to. Go out of the classroom door for a second, take a deep breath, and come back in. Interact calmly. There are a couple situations here I want us to look at before we leave. What would you do if this happened in your classroom? You're a 6th grade teacher, you line students up outside before they come in your classroom, and they're really noisy. There's a warm-up task on the board, but they just sit there and they talk to each other. The teacher begins to review, but nobody's listening. She then gives the students the answers and circulates around the room, putting a little stamp on their paper that they wrote it down. Students hurriedly then start writing down the answer. The class has not quieted down at all. What would you do? No, what would you do?
It seems like a procedural problem, so I would start off by restating how the procedure works as far as what your warm-up task is. And I would line them back up out in the hallway and say, okay, let's practice this procedure again before we move on to anything else.
Yeah.
And before you even get to the hurriedly running around the room answering things, like, no, stop, let's practice the procedure, because it's not something, doesn't seem to me like it's something that would be a rule with
Right.
consequence. It's
Yeah.
something that needs to be rehearsed and practiced again in
Yeah.
order to get it perfect
And that's exactly what I would do. I don't know about, if you have another idea, but just stop them right there. Say, no, do you remember our procedure? Let's go over it again. Line back up, and we'll do it again. The last one is a 10th grader. He's disruptive and defiant every day. He's done this since middle school. He engages in disruptive behavior instead of working. He'll argue with the teacher, he'll make threatening remarks, and past efforts usually end with him getting suspended. This is a severe case, I think, of behavior. What would you do?
I had a student like that. Actually, I've had several like that. And what I usually do is the second or third day of school, you'll know who they are. Their reputation has preceded them.
Right.
And and I take them out in the hallway and I say, look, I know that you're an awesome leader. You can take this class any place you want it to go. I know that. And so I'm telling you right now, I know you can lead them, but I'm going to ask you this. Will you help me lead them in the right direction? Will you help me so that we can learn this? Because somewhere down the line, some of this stuff you got to know. So can we work together here and not find each other all year long? Sometimes it works awesomely, and it's just every month or so you pull them out in the hallway, whether they've done an awesome job or not, and say, hey, look, I just want to remind you how much I know. You are an awesome leader, and we're supposed to be working together here. Or I just want to bring you out and let you know you are an awesome leader. I appreciate all that you're doing to help me.
And
because a lot of times
that's true.
all they want is control. And once they know they've got control, they're good.
Yeah. I think, and that leadership quality, it's there. It's just
there.
being used for evil and not good.
Right.
But yeah, and let them know that you recognize that. I think that's great. And what if it doesn't work? Well, you at least you acknowledged that with that student. Anything else you would do? One thing that occurs to me is make sure where he is in his learning. Is he not doing the work because he really can't do the work, and so he'd rather act up than look stupid? Yeah. If you need to contact me, feel free to email me. We have our website where you will see the PowerPoint in a couple weeks. If you do want other handouts, email me at this address and say, I'd like the handouts from Secondary Classroom Management. I will send them to you. If you want continuing education units, I'm supposed to announce that at the first session. You can talk to the people at the front desk where you checked in, and they'll make sure that they set you up for that. So I thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great school year. Thank you. Oh.
Two things that I do so things run a lot smoother and it cuts way down on discipline issues.
Oh, I forgot about the sticky notes.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I circulate the classroom. I do not stay in one place. I'm walking
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah,
day.
that's right. Thank you.
That-
Forgot to remind you about the sticky notes.